Hey, everybody, welcome to Resiliency Radio, your go-to podcast for the most cutting-edge insights in integrative and functional medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Jill, and with each episode, we dive into the heart of healing and personal transformation. Join us as we interview medical experts, thought leaders, and people of all types and backgrounds that bring to us new ideas for transformation, optimal performance, and longevity. Today, we're going to go back to the basics, one of my favorite topics, which is mold toxicity. Could mold be causing the weight gain, the unexplained brain fog, the fatigue? According to my colleague Dale Bredesen, those with early onset dementia, 1 in 3 have a mold exposure that's contributing to the brain fog. So stay tuned if you're curious, if you want to know more about could mold be affecting your health, we're going to dive into all things mold-related toxicity and how you can recover, regain your health, lose the weight that you put on during that time, or figure out what might be causing the problem. Looking forward to that interview with Terri Fox in just a moment. Before we go to our bio of our interviewed guest, I want to just mention if you have been around, you probably have heard me say we have great products, services, and beauty skincare regimens that are non-toxic at drjillhealth.com. Today, I just want to introduce one of my very favorite simple serum. It's called Needle-Free Serum. This one is a top seller. We have sold out multiple times because some people, patients like myself or other colleagues or my patients with autoimmunity do not want to do Botox. And because of that, this is a wonderful alternative that can decrease those fine lines and wrinkles around your eyes, on your chin, on your forehead. It is a wonderful product. It's a top seller. It's called Needle-Free Serum, and you can get that yourself at drjillhealth.com. Again, needle-free serum. Okay, let me introduce our guest. Dr. Terri Fox is a holistic integrative functional medicine doctor in Boulder, Colorado. She's my neighbor. She works on her patient's behalf as a medical detective, searching for the underlying dysfunction instead of just treating symptoms. She has expertise in fatigue, bioidentical hormones, sleep disorders, GI dysfunction, and mold-related toxicity and Lyme disease. She's certified in integrative holistic medicine, a member of ISEAI, ICI, we call it, International Society of Environmentally Acquired Illness. And she's a founding physician of Ravel, an organization committed to bringing affordable care to Lyme patients. She's also a medical advisory panel for Change the Air Foundation. So join me in just a moment as we interview Dr. Terri Fox. We're going to talk about all things mold and mold basics. Welcome back to the show, Dr. Terri Fox. You are my neighbor and friend and colleague, so it's really kind of fun, extra special to have you here on the show. Today, we're going to talk all things mold, and you and I are both mold experts in this world, so it's always fun to talk and share ideas. And I always say I learn something every time, so I'm sure you're going to share something new that even will be helpful for me. And I know for all our listeners, the way I'd love to frame it today is I want to kind of go through some of the basic questions that we get. Like I actually surveyed some of our social media groups and said, what do you want to know about mold? And what's surprising, I'm sure you're seeing this too. I don't know if it's the world, if it's the EMFs, if it's the building construction, if it's the weather, whatever. This is exponentially increasing in incidence and awareness, right? Are you seeing more and more and more people talking about it that you never thought you'd see talking about it?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think both are happening. I feel like the awareness is growing substantially in like mass consciousness and in the media and everything else. But I also, and I'm curious what you think, but my sense is that 25% is sensitive to mold is growing.
Yeah.
And I understand that I have a very distorted view because people come to me and go, I have mold, help me. And so my impression is everybody has it. But like I just think like maybe I don't know if you have these too, but I have so many college kids
Yeah.
that are so mold sick and they I just can't imagine that the buildings were not moldy when we were all in college and that maybe our buckets were not as full and the total body burden, we could tolerate it. Maybe we didn't have Wi-Fi beaming on them, making them, release 10 times more mycotoxins in the air. I think there's a variety of reasons, but to me, it seems like it's more prevalent than it used to be. How about you?
I could not agree more. And exactly the same thing, like students in high school and college and government workers. And I do agree. I think it's like the toxic load. If we think about a toxic bucket, which you both let's talk about as the load increases, and even post-pandemic, a lot of people had, variations in their immune system and things because I feel like our immune systems are just under attack. And so anything that triggers mast cell activation and immune dysfunction is more common in the average person than ever before.
Yeah, and I really think that COVID and spike protein and all that inflammation is
Mhm.
filling up the bucket. So
Yeah.
that's another factor
Yeah.
why maybe in the last 5 years it feels even more prevalent. And then also with COVID, many people stayed at home and worked at
Yes.
home. So if their home was moldy, then they had way more exposure. So then they got sicker.
Yeah, I
Uh,
saw that a lot. There were people who were like all of a sudden they're at home all the time, not going outside, not being with people, and they're like, I'm so sick. Whereas a small issue where they were there, maybe just sleeping or whatever, it became
right. They could
an issue.
tolerate some, but not that much.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
always love starting with story, and you've been on before, so you've told it, but we were both talking before. Does someone really want to hear a story again? But for sure, I want you to start because part of this, both of us have lived it, and I think it comes with so much validity, the fact that you've kind of gone through and experienced yourself. So if you want to briefly share your experience and how you got into really finding mold as the root cause for a lot of people.
Yeah, sure. So, my son was 8 years old, and he was one of those just really active little boys that was trying to like jump off bridges and and climb up trees and jump off and hurt himself all day. Underweight, scrappy, super busy. And he just started limping out of nowhere. And he was limping up the stairs, and he was, and I would be like, "Do your knees hurt?" He'd say no, and then he'd pretend like he wasn't limping. He started getting anxiety and having panic attacks. And this is like a fearless, thrill-seeking little boy. Like this was weird and different. And then he started having like a lot of little things, like he'd be stiff, like in the mornings or after a car ride, he'd be really stiff. And then he put on like 30 pounds, and he was underweight before that. So, I mean, he was only, he's this
Yeah.
tiny little dude. And so, I mean, 30 pounds on an 8-year-old is like he looked
Wow.
completely different and was so uncomfortable. Um, and so I did a bunch of testing on him. He ended up being positive for Lyme disease.
Mhm.
I started treating him for Lyme, and then quickly realized I cannot treat my own son for Lyme. It's too
Yeah.
it's too tricky. I would kept making him more sick and herxing and stuff because I didn't, I shouldn't have been doing that. Anyways, I took him eventually to see Dr. Stephen Harris in California, who's a bit of a mentor for me, and he did see him, which was great because he hadn't seen new patients in forever. And he gave me a urinary mycotoxin test, and he said, "Here, I want you to do this first." And I brought it home and I did the mycotoxin test on Kai, my son, and it was really high. And so at that point, we knew something else was going on. I live in Boulder, so does Jill. And in that year, we had the Boulder flood, which was this, massive disaster. And we thought that our house was fine. Like our whole block was pretty much decimated. Like everybody moved, and we had this sweet block of all these kids that played, and all the friends were parents, and I mean the parents were friends. Anyways, we thought our house was okay, and then we got that mycotoxin test back from my son, and I had a good indoor environmental professional out, and it turned out that we had 3 feet of water under our entire
Wow.
house, and it
Wow.
was under the vapor barrier. So we kept opening the
Yeah.
crawl space because I kept smelling things
Yeah.
and going, well, there's the vapor barrier, it looks okay.
Yeah.
So he cut it, and there was 3 feet of water under the whole house, and the airborne spore traps were through the red, like even for shiny
Wow. Oh my
airborne
goodness.
spore
Yeah.
traps. Yes. And so, anyways, so then we knew what else was going on. And, we started him on binders and, the beginnings of a mold detox protocol. And we ended up remediating the house, moving out and selling. And my marriage did not make it out of the whole thing. But as soon as I moved out and got Kai out of there, he did really, really great and recovered, yeah, pretty quickly. He was on binders and antifungals and all that. But once we got out of the exposure, it was a few months before he was back in soccer 5 days a week and back at school.
Amazing. Hey guys, just a quick reminder, if you haven't yet subscribed on YouTube, please join the more than 500,000 subscribers that are already subscribed to this channel. Hit the bell to be notified of future episodes. This helps us reach more people and get great podcast guests for you for more fun information on Resiliency Radio. If you are on another platform, Spotify, iTunes, or anywhere you listen to podcasts, would you stop by and leave us a review? Okay, thanks so much. And we're back to the show. And it sounds like, again, this infectious toxic burden, right? We talk about this all the time. And sometimes I know we agree on this. Lyme can be there, Epstein-Barr can be there, old viruses, but if you don't take care of the toxic load that's driving immune dysfunction, right? It's like that's really, you have to start there. So how cool that you kind of got, I'm sorry that you had to go
Yes.
through that, but I'm glad it was a good
Yes.
outcome. Um,
Yeah, 100%. And it's like you could, sit there and wonder what all's in the bucket and what crashed the system. I find mold like so treatable. So like if you know mold is there, you can just take a whole chunk of their bucket out.
yes, I agree. It's like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
massive elephant in the room.
Me
If
too.
you,
I feel like
so
everything gets better when you
yeah.
get rid of it.
Absolutely. And really one of the most toxic, I mean, as far as immune suppression. So, like I said, we're going to kind of go through some basic questions that for you and I,
Fun.
it's probably pretty simple, but for those people who maybe are just trying to discover what the deal is,
Sure.
go through like what would a mold patient look like symptom wise? What kind of symptoms are most common in the patients that you see?
Sure. So, fatigue, brain fog, cognitive dysfunction of all kinds, headaches and migraines, sleep anxiety, sometimes depression. And kids, I see more neuropsych stuff, more like tics and OCD and sensory integration. And then some of the, like, one of the things that's a tip off for me is a rapid, unexplained weight gain or
Yeah.
loss. And then weird neurological symptoms that don't like fall into any neurological diagnosis. So asymmetrical numbness, weakness, you can get crawling sensations, burning sensations, ice pick sensations. You can get ataxia, which is like a difficulty with balance, um, visual changes are kind of the common,
Yeah.
and then you get like just, the allergies will get
Mhm.
worse. You'll get congested and might get a chronic cough or more wheezy if you're asthmatic, that kind of thing.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. And
I
that brings
forget any
it.
big ones.
No, that was exactly what I'd say. And mood sometimes too, right? Like depression,
Yeah, I said
anxiety.
anxiety
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the sleep can be really disrupted with,
Bad,
right?
bad. Yeah. I just wrote a blog on how it messes up the sleep.
Yeah, so good. Okay, so then the diagnosis. Now, I get all the time on social media, what's the one thing to diagnose mold, right? If there only were one thing, and I love framing this, I'll let you talk about it because it really does take an important, whether you work with a coach or physician or someone, or you are working on your own, hopefully you have some guide, but it's complex. And I don't love when people just take one test, like a urine mycotoxin alone, without the rest of the story. What's your approach to testing?
Testing, I do a urine mycotoxin alone. I do, but I don't do the testing until I'm fairly suspicious. So the clinical picture is consistent, and then I'm sure you do this too, all of us that do this, but like the timeline.
Yes.
So
Yeah. The
where were you
history is huge, right?
living when all this started?
Yeah.
And then what happened when you moved to the next place? And
Mhm.
then what happened? Like you can almost tease it out
Yep.
from the
Mhm.
timeline a lot of times.
Yeah.
And then they'll go, oh, yeah, actually, that was that place that I lived in for 2 years and it had a big leak.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
okay, we're doing well.
Bingo.
Um, and I used to do all the biomarkers. I would draw the C4A and the TGF beta and all that stuff. And those are this is something that you can look in blood work. And so if your insurance covers it, then it was kind of nice to have a data point to follow as you're moving through a detox protocol. But most of like at least for me in Colorado, I have a very hard time getting a C4A, a TGF beta 1 done accurately. And by the time that sort of happened, I felt like I don't really need them anyways.
Mhm.
And so I haven't done those in a while. I mean, I put a VEGF
Yeah.
for some hints. I put an MMP9 for some hints, that kind of thing. And then yeah, I do a urinary mycotoxin. I provoke it really pretty intensely, and then that way I can pick the binders based on their
Yes.
mycotoxin load. But so
Okay.
if you're not doing just urinary mycotoxins, what are you doing?
I do the blood markers, and I do follow
The
them. I do
biomarkers. Okay.
agree with you 100%. It's harder to get them covered. It's harder to get them drawn right. So I can think that could be complicated. And you know what you said was most important? I think history, and I do visual contrast too, but those things that I always like to say, because patients are like, oh, it costs so much money. But the history, honestly, I couldn't agree
That's
more
right.
with you. Like a really good history, I'm almost always like 100% certain. And in fact, my staff jokes, I think we might have talked about this last time, of I don't think there's been one case that I've suspected of mold that hasn't come back to be
Right.
absolutely true, right? And I'm sure you're the same because you
Right.
need it to be.
Yeah, because you can tell. I
Yes.
mean, I think I've had one or two that I was shocked by, and then I think that they both turned out, like you're treating them for Lyme and you're not
Yes.
getting anywhere. And then I'm like, well, I'm just going to do a mold protocol for
Yeah.
1 month and just see if anything happens. And then they turn around and then you test them and you go, oh, you do have it. It just didn't
Yeah.
show up.
Now, this is controversial because everybody agrees differently on testing. I just love your opinion. There's three mycotoxin tests that I know about. They're real-time labs, Vibrant, and Mosaic. Who do you like? How do you provoke on those tests?
Yeah, so I personally like, I mean, probably real-time labs, but that's just because I've known it the longest and kind of trust it. To me, it feels like it's very specific. I don't get false positives from food or other things.
Mhm.
Um, but it's less sensitive. I feel like if you don't do a big provocation, you can get a false negative quite often. And so I do IV provocation.
Okay,
I do
wonderful.
an IV of phosphatidylcholine and glutathione, which will both help pull out mycotoxins into the urine, the stool, and the sweat before we collect the urine. We do it about an hour after. If somebody's already on a mold protocol and we're doing a retest, then I have them stop binders for 3 days before the myco, because you don't want to be pulling the mycotoxins into the GI tract and try to see what's there in the urine. And then I actually have them stay on antifungals if they're on them,
Mhm.
with the idea that if there is any colonized mold remaining in the system and I'm killing it with a antifungal and it releases its mycotoxins and it's even a more provoked test.
Excellent.
Yeah, so I do all that. If they can't come in for an IV, I can walk them through, a lot of liposomal glutathione and infrared sauna or hot bath, or sometimes a lot of times if they can't do the IV, I just do Vibrant. I like Vibrant's mycotoxin. Now I think I've been using it
I
long enough.
do too. It's so funny. I'm
And
exactly
I
like
feel
you.
really,
There's a lot of controversy. I love real-time labs. They've been around forever. Totally agree. Their technology is not as sensitive, but if you get a positive, you know you're likely dealing with a real.
yeah, yeah. I don't think I ever felt like one was not right when
Yeah.
it was positive. And I love Vibrant. I've been using it long enough now to feel like it's just really consistent. And
Yeah.
you do the binders and the things come down
Yeah.
and they go back up and you go, oh, do an ERMI. And then you see
Yeah.
that they do have a new thing. Like it feels, I like it
That's
too.
exact clinical practice. I'm like that vibrant. It always parallels. So I've been really
I do too.
impressed with it as
Yep.
well. Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
I'm totally down with
Yeah,
Vibrant.
very
Yeah.
good. Now, this is a
Yeah.
kind of a funny question. Again, it came from our listeners, but it's can black mold kill you or cause permanent damage? What's your thoughts
Yeah,
on that?
I mean, of course it can. I mean, with the stuff that we see, probably you and I more often, is it's slowly poisoning you in a really miserable
Yeah.
way, as opposed to being a dramatic quick death or anything. But yeah, I mean, they can cause cancer, they can cause all kinds of stuff. And do you hear this now? Like, so you know how once you get the mold diagnosis and then people start thinking back and they're like, oh, my house flooded like every summer when I was little, or they start remembering and then they realize that, oh my gosh, like my mom got like, she died of whatever cancer or encephalitis thing, and she had all this mold in her room. And so now they're, thinking it was likely actually mold.
So true. I love talking to you because that's exactly, I mean, I've even had someone that, oh yeah, my mom died of a aspergilloma, yeah, like aspergillus in the lungs. Like,
Exactly. And I'm like, ah, how
I know
much
you and
time
I are
did
like,
you
listen, we're
spend
like, are you
cleaning out her house?
exactly. Oh, I did have a patient just recently clean out her mom's house. It was so moldy and she was so sick and she became suicidal. And thank goodness
Oh,
she's
no.
okay. But they all thought it was grief from losing her mother. That
Oh,
would,
right.
but when she went down, I mean, she was as she's talking, I'm like, oh my goodness, what are you doing? How are you doing this? And she stopped cleaning it out. And even though she was grieving, she was not suicidal at all, you know?
Uh-huh, right.
So
Yep.
and just
That'll make you feel
yeah, it
crazy.
will. It's just
It
God.
is.
So, and like I said, the history, I just love that because that's something free. Speaking of doctors, I'd love to
Exactly.
know your thought. You and I are doctors, and we obviously deal with patients, and I like to encourage people to get a professional to help them. If patients are looking for, obviously, there's you and I out there, but what kind of a doctor are they looking for? And I know you and
Oh,
I,
great question.
yeah. So, how do they get help? Because the traditional doctor, maybe you could frame it in the sense of like in medical school, we
Yeah.
just weren't taught the innate immune system and mold, right?
Yep, yep. So in medical school, they don't teach us anything about mold,
Yeah.
at all. And wait, what was it? What was the original
So,
question?
how do you find a doctor to treat you?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So if you know it's mold, then I think you go straight to ICI, which is the International Society of Environmentally Acquired Illness. It's all the mold experts in the world that kind of, organize together. You can usually go to any ILADS or Lyme literate doc. Most of them will know about mold, or they'll guide you to somebody that does. If you're not sure, if it's mold, but you have some, chronic, complex, complicated illness that, Western medicine isn't helping you with, but maybe they're giving you some labeled diagnosis, some trash can diagnoses like mixed connective tissue disorder or
Yes.
chronic fatigue or those sorts of things. Then you could start with a functional medicine doc. Not all of them know about biotoxin illness, which is mold, Lyme, and co-infections, but some do, and they can usually get you started. And that would be, there's a directory on the Institute of Functional Medicine. There's a directory at ICI, the mold one, and there's one at ILADS. And you can even look up the Integrative Holistic Medicine Institute and get, a list there and start to find people near where you live and, do meet and greets with them and see who feels good.
Super helpful, right? Because you and I are pretty busy. I know we sometimes have to refer out and other states especially. I want to just put a plug in. We'll talk about this at the end. And if you're driving, don't worry, it'll be in the show notes. But you've got a course. So if you want to learn more, that's going to be live probably when this video goes live. So maybe just say a tiny little bit about that and then we'll keep going with the questions.
Yeah, sure. So, I am an MD as is Jill, and I can really only treat people in Colorado, because that's where my medical license is. And so I get calls from, all over the world, and I generally have to turn away people who are not in Colorado. And I had people for so many years say, you just need to make an online course. You need to make a course so other people can, get better that don't, there's not good mold docs everywhere. And so I did. I created a mold treatment course for patients. It's very, handheld, step by step, pretty extensive, but so yeah, so I created that so people everywhere can get the, right information for a really safe detox mold eradication protocol.
Awesome. And again, if you're listening, we'll make sure you have links to that. So how do we start the detox? What's your kind of basics 101, detox 101 if you've been exposed to mold?
Yeah, sure. So I do it in two phases. So, phase one is bind and unwind. And phase one is where we sort of train the body. So, the people that get sick from mold are the ones that cannot detox it. They can't get it out in the urine, the stool, and the sweat. And so, there has to be a moment where we're training the body how to pull these toxins out. And so, that's where we get all the right binders for the molds that they have in their system. We do liposomal glutathione. We support your kidney, liver, lymph detoxification pathways and channels to begin draining that bucket overall. And I do usually a nasal spray. And once somebody's up to full doses of binders and having daily bowel movements and sweating and doing all the things after about 4 weeks, then I start phase two, which is which is antifungals and biofilm.
Yeah.
And if I don't know what your experience is, but some people, when they're no longer being exposed, 2 weeks on the right binders, you'll begin to see a clinical turnaround. And then usually when I start phase two is when I really see the needle move more dramatically.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. It takes, and in fact, I always kind of warn people in the very beginning, as you're, I think about it, say in your tissues, and you're kind of mobilizing it out of your tissues into the bloodstream so the kidney and the gut
Yeah.
and the liver can filter. So it's almost like you can get re-exposed in the beginning as you're mobilizing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So home testing, you and I are not like we're not environmental experts, but we kind of have to become to some extent because there's questions. So how do you advise your patients to figure out either where the mold is or if they know it's in their home to do the testing?
Yeah, sure. So if most people think that it's not in their home.
Yeah.
Most people are like, oh, my home, no, definitely not.
It's new, right?
Um,
How many times have you
it's
heard it's a
brand
brand new
new.
home?
No, it's just 2 years ago. I'm like, where did they put the wood they were building it with? Was
Yeah.
it outside under all the snow and the rain?
Yeah.
Anyway, so if they're very insistent that they don't think that it's in their home, then I just have them do an URMI,
Mhm.
which is a DNA dust
Yeah.
Swiffer test to look for the DNA of mycotoxins. If they have any suspicion or they're open to it, then I go ahead and get them a full home evaluation with an indoor environmental professional. And so if they're in Colorado, I have, specific people that I think are really good at doing this. If they're not in Colorado, I have a few other resources I like we inspect.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, so ideally everybody would get an indoor environmental professional to come out and they'll look at your attics and your crawl spaces and your vents and, where your hose things
Mhm.
connect to your house and your gutters. And, they'll have infrared cameras and damp meters. And I kind of feel like when you do that full home evaluation, it can help prevent mold. So if you don't even have it, they'll tell you 20 little things that are about to start being water damage and water leaks. So that's really helpful too.
I love that because I've been kind of looking at real estate and maybe I'll buy a home soon. And as I go, I take my mold inspector every time because I'm like, and then I know because my thought is, especially buying a home or moving, it's like there's going to be something with every home, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost inevitable that there'll be, and it may be something like you said, where there's an issue that could become an issue and it's not yet an issue. So
Right.
hopefully, and I always want to know as I'm thinking about buying a home, I just want to know what's there because if it's a foundational issue, I'll probably walk away. If it's like windows that need replacing, I might say, yeah, I'll do that. And then, so I
Yeah.
think same as our patients where they just kind of need to know the state of their home. And so many people, especially me, like I'm so mechanically challenged. I don't typically know the good maintenance protocols and schedules. And I think half of the battle with prevention is just really being diligent to do the things we need to do, like, put silicone seal around the shower or make sure you're cleaning your front load. First of all, you probably shouldn't have a front load washer, but if you do, you have to replace or clean that gasket frequently. Any other just little tips of things that might be preventative for patients?
Oh, do I?
Yeah, I was just thinking about
Yeah,
like,
I have a lot of them. I have a whole mold prevention guide.
oh, wonderful. We'll have to
It's
take your
sent you.
course.
They could have it free.
Yeah.
But I mean, just like I guess you imagine anywhere that water could intrude into your house, you want to have checks. So, you want to look at your roof or have a roofer look at your roof and the flashing everywhere on the roof, and then your gutters, make sure that they're actually working and that they've got downspouts pulling it out from the outside of the house. I have a couple little fun gadgets. So I have like a flow, it's called a flow meter. It's on my water main.
Yeah.
And if there's an unusual amount of water going out from anywhere, it shuts the whole water main down. And
Wow.
so I get little, notifications on my phone
Uh-huh.
that there's unusual, water usage. Do I want to not stop
Yeah.
the water main from turning off or not? And so I like that because it just sort of, in Colorado, we get a lot of really cold
Yeah.
weather. And so if I'm out of town and my pipe froze and burst and I wasn't even here, like that would kill
Yeah,
me.
right.
So, if something like that kind of catastrophic happens, the flow meter will just shut off the water main and it won't get all that bad. So I like that thing. That makes me kind of feel better. And I have the iWave. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I haven't.
So the iWave it's an ionizer, but it goes on your HVAC.
Oh yeah.
And so it basically produces positive and negative ions, and then has a magnet. And what it does is it sort of takes the particulate out of the breathing air and pulls it to the ground. And
Nice.
then you just have to, wash your floors a little more often. But and it's on your HVAC system, so it's in the ducts and everything,
Wow.
which I love. And
Like having a continuous fogging, because that's the point of fogging a house, right? Just bringing that particulate down.
right, kind of bringing it down, but I mean, it's different
Yeah.
from fog, but I love that. I think getting your ducts cleaned is a big, huge help. And then just like cleaning, like it likes dust. Mycotoxins and nanoparticles will just hang out in the dust in your ducts. And then, they'll be in
Yeah.
your air. And, so you want to sort of you don't want to overly sterilize, but you want to keep the dust kind of free. I also tell people like, change your doormats where you walk in and wipe off your shoes and your bath mats and stuff like that.
Oh, wonderful practical tips. I love all those because those are just
Yeah.
like people can go check those right away or get an eye
Yeah, pretty
or
quick.
now this one we answered, but I just want to emphasize because I think you even said it's one of the most weird and common things you see. But someone said, can mold make you gain weight or become anxious or depressed?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. It does in most people. So we often see unexplained rapid weight gain and loss. For me, that's a big tip off. So if somebody's had all the, like they've got a bunch of the symptoms and then they say they put on an unusual or they lost an unusual amount of weight in a short amount of time. And then some of the most common symptoms that we see are anxiety, insomnia, and depression. And then more neuropsych stuff in kids too. So like OCD, sensory integration, ADHD, a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, wow, that's great because that is, I want to emphasize that because I agree with you. When I see a rapid weight gain for no other reason or loss, it's like, okay, this has got to be mold until proven otherwise.
Yeah.
And people are like, I'm doing the same thing. There's no change. And they
Yeah.
can even become diabetic. I'm sure you've seen that as well. It's a real big trigger for the enzymes of leptin resistance.
Yes. And do you know, I haven't done a deep dive on this one yet. Do you know why? Like what is the mechanism that it sort of increases your risk of diabetes or blood sugar dysregulation?
I think it is I think it's the mechanism with leptin receptors.
It
That's
is the
what
leptin. Okay.
that's a great question. We'll have to
Yeah.
research and come
I'm
back
gonna
on and
go
tell
on
all this.
ChatGPT in a
Yeah,
minute.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly, exactly. We'll find out why, because we both see it, obviously. The last question someone asked, and then we can wrap this up is, and this is a big question for experts outside of you and I, but remediation of the home. Obviously, we have a professionals do that, not you and I, but we need to know a lot about telling our patients because it can be successful or unsuccessful. What are the biggest tips you could give, and also the things that you've seen cause failure of remediation?
Um, so I would maybe the first thing I'd like to say is that it's a completely unregulated industry. Anybody can go online and say that they're a remediator or they're an inspector. There's no like regulation. So you really want to use a company that you trust or a doctor that trust because I've seen quite a few instances where people will, pay for a remediation. They'll spend $80,000 and they're still sick and they'll look on their video cameras and the people came in and did nothing.
Yeah.
And for me, that's like the saddest case of all is like the remediation that didn't happen, that somebody
Yes.
spent all their money on and they're still sick. Like a bad remediation is just, it's the worst.
Yeah.
So yeah, choose really wisely. If you don't have anybody that you know where you live, like I'm sure both of our websites have people that are local in Colorado. I like Home Cleanse. They go pretty much everywhere, and they're great and legitimate. And then the one of the parts for me, so remediation has a whole bunch of parts to it, right? So the first thing is demoing. So you're demolishing and you're taking out any wet,
Mhm.
moldy materials, and you're going another 24 inches from anywhere that you can see that's damp or moldy. So you're removing everything. That has to be done under containment and with negative air pressure. So as soon as you move a piece of wet drywall or you pull it out of the wall, all the mold and mycotoxins go and they just spread everywhere. And then they go in your ducts, and now they're upstairs on the third floor or wherever else they are. And so the containment is critical, or it'll make it worse. And the negative air pressure. I in fact tell people if you cannot afford to do it correctly, don't touch it.
I
We'll,
agree. I
we'll
love that.
contain it
Yeah.
with 6-inch plastic stuff.
Yeah.
Just don't touch it so you can do it right, because you'll get more sick. It's just
Mhm.
not worth it. So that's really important. And then so after you demo all the, stuff that we know is moldy out, the remediation part is like HEPA vacuuming every single surface, your ceilings, your walls, any, leather couches you're keeping. And then you wipe down with, hydrogen peroxide or a good antifungal something. You can fog at the end is nice, but not essential.
Mhm.
But that final part is called small particulate cleanup, and not all remediation companies do it. Even some of the really good ones don't do it, and I find people will remain sick if you don't do a small particulate cleanup. And the reason is mold releases these mycotoxins and all these other little tiny, nanoparticles that are toxic and pathogenic to those of us that are sensitive to mold. So if you even get rid of the mold source, but those mycotoxins are still hanging out in all your drywall, they're going to be just as toxic to you as if the mold was still living there. And there's a lot of ways to get this small particulate cleanup done. So if your remediation company doesn't do it, there's several guides online. So ICI has a small particulate cleanup guide. So does Change the Air Foundation. And we have a mold mentor here in Boulder. Her name is Jessica McQuaid, and she works all over the country. And she has a small particulate cleanup guide that you can buy for, I think it's like 50 or $60 online. And it walks you through exactly how to do the whole thing.
Wow, love that. So specific and so accurate. And I think that there's always a message I want to get out there too. It's just that just the remediation without taking care of, I always think is like if say you had a fire in your house and you clean up all the stuff that got burned and that
And
smoke damage, right? You got to clean up
good.
the smoke. And I love that analogy because it's kind of the same idea of these
It is
microplastics.
perfect.
Yeah, and so you got to clean the smoke, and that means wiping down your walls. And I just read, I don't know if you read this, but it was a study around wildfires and the damage that happens around wildfire smoke, even if the house wasn't burned or damaged. And it used to be that like ozone or hydroxyl machines would go in there and they'd remediate the air. And they compared that to a wipe down, like a small particulate clean just for fires. The wipe down was so much better. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
interesting because to me, it's parallel to the mold story
It
and
is.
right. And it's data driven now that a wipe
Yeah.
down a small particulate clean is way better than just any sort of air cleaning.
100%. And let's just say it out loud. Fogging alone won't do anything.
Yes, yes, agreed. Fogging alone won't do it. I'll say it again because
Let's say it one more time. Yeah.
oh gosh, then I knew it would be great, but it was even better than I thought. I think it's really fun to kind of go back to the basics because so many people out there are listening and wondering, and I know
It's
this
true.
episode will be super popular. And as we mentioned, you've got a course coming out. So where can people
It's out and
Okay,
available. Yeah.
out. Okay, where can
Yeah.
people find more information about that?
Yeah. So it's drfoxmedicaldetective.com is the website. And there's a, webinar and a bunch of blogs and podcasts and stuff on there if you want to learn more. And then my clinic website is boulderholistic.com.
Awesome. We will put this in the show notes so that you guys, if you're driving or whatever, you don't have to take notes. Dr. Fox, neighbor and friend, thanks again for coming on, and it was such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I feel like we're out there doing the same work.
Yes, yes, and we need
Yeah.
each other. Hey, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that episode with Dr. Terri Fox, my friend and neighbor in Boulder, Colorado. I love just going back to the basics of mold. It is becoming an increasing issue for more and more people, and it's so fun to just go back to basic questions and make sure that we get that information out there for people who are suffering for mold-related illness. If you liked this episode, would you please share it with someone you know that might be suffering from mold-related illness or unexplained symptoms? That would be a great way to share the great information and wisdom on mold. So I hope you enjoyed the show. We will see you again next week for another episode of Resiliency Radio.